Anyway, so we'll get started.
Cool.
Thank you very much for meeting with me to talk about your running as guild president for Life in Action. That's right. I hope so, otherwise it'd be very awkward interview. So firstly, I just want to ask, so what steps or what has led you to be running with Life in Action as guild president?
Well, I've been involved in activism for a couple of years, and we're just a ticket of student activists. So, basically, through my involvement in campaigns against racism, campaigns for marriage equality, different things, I've sort of been doing a lot of that work, and we really want to bring that activist perspective into the guild and be pushing for more student activism and for the guild to have that orientation. So being involved in activism is basically what led me here.
Yeah, sure. So you've been involved in Life in Action for a while now. That's kind of you standing there, just rose up and named here, sort of running as president, in charge of student activism. Don't want to put words in your mouth. So on that, what do you see as Life in Action's role in the guild as it stands and what it could be? I mean, you're not a traditional ticket in the sense that you don't really fill up all the OB positions, all that kind of thing. You mainly run on what do you see as Life in Action's role in the guild?
Well, it's I already started to outline it a bit, but we want to have an activist perspective in the student guild. The guild has huge amounts of resources here at UWA. It's a multi-million-dollar institution. It has the capacity to reach out and contact every student on campus if it wants to, and frequently does, but it doesn't really usually put an activist stance forward, and I think that historically student guilds, student unions have played the role of getting students involved in activism and organising them around the big issues, whether it's against the Vietnam War or apartheid, anti-racist campaigns, whether it's campaigns for gay liberation and women's liberation, or whether it's campaigns around things like getting an underpass built so that the kids aren't getting killed as they cross the road, anything. Sure. Student guilds should play that role, and so I see Left Action as intervening into the student guild to push for more of that, and to try and use the guild as much as possible, because we're currently facing a climate emergency to really try and push for that, which is why Left Action called the climate referendum this guild election about whether the guild should declare a climate emergency, because we think the guild has that political role to play, historically has played it, and now isn't playing it so much, and so I want to enter into the guild and push for that as much as possible. Sure.
So, I mean, I don't know if you've seen, obviously the referendum was announced on the guild social media. I don't know if you engage with much of the comments or anything like that, but a lot of people seem to feel like they were, if the guild does declare, if the referendum does go through, as far as I'm aware, there's hopefully not a no party or anything like that. But if the referendum is approved and all that, how do you see that approval sort of engaging with those students who believe that the guild can't really do anything about this thing?
Yeah, well, there's a few things in that question. So one of them is that a lot of the comments on the guild post seemed to come from a very specific subset of students who were much more right-wing, because when to get the referendum called in the first place, Left Action had to collect over 500 signatures to put it through. So there's at least 500 students who actively want that referendum to be called and asked.
Sure.
So that's part of the question, is that there's clearly a left-right divide. That's always going to be the case on any campus, any campaign. The second thing is that, we actually want to use that question to get students involved in climate activism, not just in that they're aware of it and they sign a thing, they vote for it, whatever. We think that the reason to have that referendum is so that it's a reason to push for the guild to do more on climate change and do more around climate activism. So if it just passes and then all the guild does is acknowledge the fact there's a crisis and maybe make a couple of changes here on campus. Those changes are good, they should totally happen, but the guild can and should do much, much more. It should direct so much more of its resources. And so I would say to anyone who is unsure about why this question is being called or anything, is that, the guild should have a political role in pushing for climate change in our society, in organising encouraging them to do things like come along to the September 20 global climate strike. And yeah, declaring a climate emergency is part of establishing this is a problem, we're taking it very seriously, and then yeah, getting students involved in activism after that is what will actually start to make a change. So this is kind of like the first step.
Yeah, sure. Have you looked into anything that the Guild has previously done in this kind of area? I know there have been a few business cases that have been approved and like money allocated to like, I don't know, the most recent thing that's coming off the top of my head is like carbon neutralising a lot of the events on campus. I mean, have you looked into stuff that the Guild has done?
I mean, I know that like, you know, the Guild has done things like install different places for recycling your coffee cups, and you know, try to do some small environmental things. Like, again, I think that's all good stuff. We should be doing that. But I think that we need a much bigger campaign. We need basically to get every student possible engaged in a mass campaign against climate action, because that's what's actually going to turn the tide. That's what's going to challenge the fundamental problem, which is like the sort of proliferation today of the fossil fuel industry. The fact that the UWA administration has ties to companies like Chevron, and Chevron's one of the companies that is in the top 100 polluters on Earth that are responsible for 70% of emissions across the globe. You know, we need to take a stand against things like that. So yeah, the Guild has you know, done some things, has proposed to do some more things. Fantastic, but we need to go much more beyond that to actually challenge the level of the crisis. Like, that's why we're calling it an emergency. Yeah,
sure. You mentioned that you want to try and get, you know, as many students involved in this as possible, as many students involved in like getting the Guild to change their attitudes, their structures, whatever that may be. At the end of the day, there are like a lot of students who realistically show up to class, show up with their tutors, go home. They don't engage with the Guild as it is. How do you sort of propose that you will engage with those students? Is it worth it in your opinion, or sort of how do you propose that you're going to, you know, engage those students who at the end of the day just show up for classes and don't really engage in uni beyond that?
Yeah, I mean, the National Union of Students ran a survey that showed that over 60% of students said that climate change was their #1 issue. So I think students are very concerned and do really care. At the moment, students don't really understand what the Guild is. They don't understand that it's a union, and the point of a union is to fight for their rights and fight for their interests and play a political role in society, of pushing forward progressive causes and fighting for change. And so it's not surprising that if the majority of what the Guild does or is seen to be doing is around, you know, running it more like a business, and it sort of seems like a part of just the whole rest of the university, that students don't really want to engage. So I think that's a problem, and that activism would be part of like what would make it clear that the Guild is a union and she is fighting, and people want to engage when there's a fight that seems like it's actually going to achieve something.
Sure.
The other thing is, I don't think students really want to participate in a Guild that is run and totally controlled and dominated by a bunch of students who are very wealthy, very cliquish, and sort of quite insular. I don't think the Guild is outlooking enough in that sense, and you know, doing things like, you know, running things that most students can't participate in, don't want to participate in. Yeah, it really turns a lot of students off.
Yeah. Do you have any do you have any ideas on top of the head, like events that you don't see as successful for students engaging in the Guild, or is it just more like the attitude and the environment that you think is sort of like turning students off?
Yeah, I kind of think both. I just think like the fact that, you know, whenever you get your Guild weekly newsletter, it's not really got anything in it that is like, hey, like connecting to the real things. Like if 60% of students care about climate change and say that is their #1 priority, then yeah, the Guild should actually demonstrate that, well, you know, there's a climate strike coming up. Like the Guild should send an email to every student to encourage them to come along to that. And once it starts to play that role, start to engage students. So I just think the lack of activism, and the lack of having a strategy of putting as much resources as possible into activism is what actually means shutting out a lot of students, and means that, they don't want to go do anything but their classes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Do you think that the Guild is the best kind of body for this kind of activism in terms of, I mean, you know, structurally, is the guild council, should all the OBs be elected, should your party be elected, is the guild the best structure for this kind of thing to play out, if that makes sense? Why don't you guys turn your energy into more like political parties and stuff? Why in that, if that makes sense? Why focus on like student unions when there could also be like energy put elsewhere outside of the student sphere?
Well, because we are university students,
Yeah, sure.
and historically, guilds have had a really important role in pushing for the kinds of things that we want to see. Like, if you look back to the 60s and 70s, it's the student guilds that lead the charge in fighting against the Vietnam War and all of those things that I've sort of mentioned earlier. And so I think the guild is 100% the best body to be doing that, because it's well placed. It's literally like represents all the students on campus. So if you want to fight for students' interests, you should do that through the union, basically. And so I think that's the fundamental role of what the guild should do.
Sure. I think that there are other issues facing students besides climate change. I mean, while it's very, very important, how do you see yourself sort of reconciling with the fact that, there are other issues? Where do your priorities lie? How do you, you can't really, realistically, should be elected, all that kind of thing. You can't put all your eggs in the one basket of climate change. Distribution of resources and energy and time need to be spent elsewhere. How do you see, your role in council potentially being affected by, you being pushed in several directions?
Well, I think you're right in that there's a lot of issues that affect students. I'm not saying that the guild should, solely focus on climate change. I think, things like the fact that the government is now reflagging to have drug testing for welfare, and most students exist on welfare, is something that absolutely should be fought. Raising the minimum wage, those campaigns can all be fought through the student guild. I feel like there's another part to your question.
Yeah, just how do you see yourself competing with all these different needs when you're currently focusing on climate change?
Right. Well, the thing is to say that we're a minor ticket, so it's not as though we're planning to take over.
Sure. That's structurally you guys don't put don't put roles up for all the OBs and stuff. You guys are
just as an activist ticket. What we should do is be in there pushing for activism as much as possible and getting as much resources as we can put into whatever activist thing. That doesn't always have to be climate change, although I think increasingly it has to be a lot focused on climate change. The other campaigns I mentioned are important too. And just playing a role of trying to keep the rest of the guild honest and accountable. Having someone who's quite oppositional in the guild is an important strategy of being able to do that. So that's how I see a lot of that role as well. Just sort of a keep the bastards honest kind of vibe.
Yeah, sure. What do you want to change about council and the way that council functions and operates? I know you've only been
I've been to one guild council.
But it's from your knowledge of being involved in left action and obviously hearing stories and things like that from people who've been on council before. What do you wish that you could change about it? Functions?
I wish there was more activists. I wish the people who were there were more willing to dedicate resources and time to activism and just taking a political stance on issues in general. I know that this year the guild, the current people both from Star and Launch didn't want to take a stand on the situation in Sudan, where there was a revolution to overthrow a dictatorship that had been in power for decades, and the military had started to slaughter the people who were fighting for their rights, and that was seen as a bit too controversial. I don't think it's controversial to stand against dictators, but I also think it's really important for the guild to be playing a political role. Similarly, we tried to push a motion against fracking and against McGowan lifting the ban of gas fracking in Australia, and that was not heard. No one was willing to second that motion. So I think that is a real big problem, and I would like to see that change. Maybe people might sort of start to come to their senses, but I think the fact that most people are either in the Labour or Liberal political party, support the fossil fuel industry, don't want to make things too political is a problem, and I would change that. But I think the only way to change that is to get more activists elected.
Yeah, sure thing. Should you be elected, I think you're, forgive me if I'm wrong, but you're also running for an OGC position? Yeah. So should you be elected on the council for either whatever role that you put forward, how do you see yourself compromising with other OBs, working with other OBs and other parties?
It depends what you mean by compromising, because...
Not compromising, probably not the best word, but how do you see yourself like working with other parties and things like that?
Well, I mean, I know recently there was some collaboration on the August 9 university student demonstration. I see myself, as an activist who does have a different political strategy. I think the best thing is actually for me to be putting that opposition forward and trying to argue for those people to do more. So how I see myself working with the other people is having debate and discussion with them about the political problems that are happening in our society, and trying to encourage them to do as much as possible to contribute as many resources as possible to the activist causes that I think are really important for all students, whether it's climate change, whether it's like wage rise, whether it's anything that comes up in future. Yeah.
Sure. Lastly from me, because this is a Guild presidential interview, why do you want to be Guild president?
Well, as we've kind of gone over, I'm running on a minority ticket. I don't actually want to be Guild president. What I want to do is enter into the debate that is happening in this political contest over who should be in the Guild, what it should do, how it should be run, and I want to put forward a particular strategy, and that strategy is of being adversarial to the powers that be, the rich, the powerful, the university administration, the government, whatever it is, and just fight for students' rights, student interest, and progressive causes in society. So I want to be not actually president, but on Guild Council, to be able to push for that as much as possible.
Sure, and represent the students who want to do this change.
Yeah, and that is shown consistently each year that there are students who do want that. So I'm going to be representing those people and fighting as much as possible for activism and getting as many students involved in things like the global climate strike that's coming up, or the Week of Rebellion that Extinction Rebellion is planning, and other things like that. Yeah.
Sure, cool. Well, that's all from me. Thank you very much for...
No worries. Thanks for having me.
No worries.